So before we begin today's conversation, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and recognise a continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Sovereignty has never been ceded, it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. My name is Barisha Tashnan and I'm in Year 11 and I'm the Publicity Officer of the Fort Street High School SRC Executive. I'm joined by Veronica Kwong, who is our Data Analyst. Today we'll be in conversation with the Honourable Tanya Plibersek and our colleague Charlotte. Mrs. Plibersek is the Shadow Minister for Education, Shadow Minister for Women and a Federal Member for Sydney. So thank you for joining us today, Mrs. Plibersek. So you've been elected as a Member of Parliament since 1998, been a Cabinet Minister for a variety of titles in both the Gillard and Rudd governments, as well as work for disadvantaged women and marginalised groups. So do you mind telling us more about yourself and what you do and have done in the past?
Yes, well, I was elected to the Federal Parliament in 1998, so I guess I've been a Member of Parliament for about 23 years now, and I represent the seat of Sydney, which is the central business district of Sydney and the inner suburbs from Glebe, Redfern, Waterloo, Beaconsfield, Rosebery, across to Darlinghurst, Surrey Hills, King's Cross. And weirdly, Lord Howe Island is also part of the federal electorate of Sydney. And so I've got about 100,000, just over 100,000 constituents. And I represent their interests in the federal parliament. And as you said, I've also been a minister, and currently I'm a shadow minister. I'm the Shadow Minister for Education and the Shadow Minister for Women. So my job is twofold. It's representing the electors of Sydney in the federal parliament, but it's also running education policy for the Federal Labor Party and women's policy as well.
All right, next question is, do you see a possibility for change of government at next year's election? And what role might young people play in determining the future of our nation?
Well, I certainly hope there's a change of government, but I guess you'd expect me to say that. Look, I think young people play two really important roles. The first is as political activists in their own right. And I know that a lot of the young people I know are very committed, for example, to action on climate change, to an economy that actually works for them as well as for previous generations. So graduating into a labour market where you can get a secure job with decent pay and some certainty and predictability in the workplace, an education system that gives you the opportunity of going to good quality TAFE or university education after you finish high school, but also throughout your life as your skill and education needs change, as the world of work that you're in changes. And I'd say issues like gender equality and climate change are really front of mind for a lot of the young people I know. So, speaking up and making sure that that you articulate that vision for the future, the sort of future that you want for the nation, for your generation, is really important. And I think the school strikes for climate change are a really good example of young people making their voices heard about what matters to them. There's also, of course, the influence that you can have not just in the macro political arena, but also with the people that you love, the people that you're closest to. I was reading Rebecca Huntley's book on climate, how to convince climate skeptics that it's important to take action to reduce the risks of harmful climate change. And she looks at research that says the person most likely to convince a sceptical middle-aged man to change is his teenage daughter. We have a lot of power with the people closest to us if we're prepared to engage calmly and thoughtfully, to gather your facts. I don't think you ever convince anyone by shouting at them, but talking to the people around you and talking to them about the future that you want to see for the planet. I think that's it's a really important thing to do. And I think about my own parents. My parents growing up very devout Catholics, and I'm pro-choice, and as long as I've had an opinion on a woman's right to choose, I've always been pro-choice. And I remember when I was about 14 or 15 having that conversation with my parents and saying, well, I know I respect your religious views, but just think about it. Imagine if I got pregnant now, what would you want me to do? Would you want me to have the baby? And actually having that conversation in a calm and thoughtful way, I think did change their minds a little bit at the time. So we shouldn't underestimate, and young people shouldn't underestimate their power to convince, to persuade the people around them.
I think that definitely does resonate for a lot of young people who are very frustrated with the government in terms of climate inaction and, you know, array of other issues. But speaking of your parents, how would you say being a first generation immigrant impacted your life in terms of your career? And what are some things you've learnt as a first generation immigrant?
Well, as a kid, I learned that bring a plate didn't mean bring an empty plate. Actually, look, I think there is something pretty common to the migrant story, which, and it's not, you know, nothing's universal, but I think there's a pretty common experience that you are really aware of the sliding doors kind of nature of your existence. You think, if my parents hadn't made the decision to come to Australia, how different would my life be if I'd been, even if the two of them had met and I'd been born in Slovenia, which was at that time Yugoslavia, how different would my life have been? And it's beautiful there. All my extended family are still there, but I would have had fewer opportunities. I don't think I'd be a member of Parliament, of the Slovenian Parliament. For most people, a really extraordinary sense of gratitude, and for many people, a real impetus to give back because of that sense of gratitude. So you think, I'm so lucky that I was born here. What can I do to sort of repay the universe for that good fortune? So I see a lot of first generation kids who are very hardworking, very self-disciplined, but, you know, to take advantage of the opportunities that their parents' decisions have given them, but also have a really strong sense of wanting to contribute to the community that they're part of, to repay the great good fortune of being born Australian.
Thank you for that. The next question is, the government has faced harsh scrutiny from elements of the student population regarding the inaction on climate change. When do you really think the Australian government will take genuine climate action, if at all?
I don't think the Morrison government will. And I think they're doing their very best to get out of taking any serious action on climate change. And the madness of this is not only the damage that it does to the environment, the madness of it is that renewable energy is cheaper as well as being cleaner. We now, the International Energy Agency says solar electricity is the cheapest form of electricity in human history, and Australia is absolutely uniquely placed to take advantage of that. Not only have we got, you know, plenty of sunlight, but we also have some of the best research into solar energy anywhere in the world happening right here in Australia. We should be commercialising that. It's true of wind and other forms of pumped hydro. There's a range of other energy types that Australia could be world leading in, and that includes green hydrogen. I think green hydrogen is the next huge energy opportunity for Australia. It would allow us not only an export industry in green hydrogen, but also when we look at energy intensive products like steel, aluminium, cement, fertiliser, other chemicals. Like, there's a bunch of things that are really energy intensive to make that we are currently making largely through coal-fired electricity. the world will not be interested in buying in a few years' time. Europe's already looking at carbon tariffs. Countries and consumers are looking for less polluting products that are less polluting in their manufacture. And business gets this. Like, I actually see companies saying we want to source our 100% of our energy in the future through renewable electricity. It's mad that our government isn't making that easier. And they're still talking about, a new coal-fired power plant in far north Queensland. Like, we could be a world leader in clean energy, supporting new jobs and new industries. And instead we're turning our backs as a nation on that future. It's so irresponsible. It's vandalism, not just of our environment, but of our economy. And why is it happening? It's happening because there's a tiny minority of people in the Liberal and National parties who are absolutely determined to pretend that this great economic change is not happening globally. It's happening. And we can be part of it and we can take advantage of it. Or we can miss out. And at the moment, we're headed for missing out.
We'd love to hear about the barriers that you face getting into politics, as it is such a male-dominated, career. So what sort of challenges did you face, and what sort of challenges do you see that women still face getting into politics?
I was very lucky in a sense because my electorate is the electorate of Sydney, and the branch members of the electorate of Sydney, when my predecessor Peter Baldwin announced that he was going to retire, I think there was a very strong desire at that time in 1997 to see more women elected to Parliament. There was a lot of Labor Party members who were determined that Peter would be replaced by a woman. And when we were having the pre-selection process, so the process that decides who the Labor candidate will be, there were 13 candidates, and there are only, I think, 3 blokes out of that 13 from memory. It's a while ago. So all the other candidates were female. So it's very likely that a woman was going to be successful in replacing Peter Baldwin, and there was strong desire from the members that would be the case. That's not the same everywhere, and I certainly think it varies from party to party. I think, in 1994, the Labor Party had passed its first affirmative action rules saying that 35% of winnable seats would be female candidates. And we met that target. We raised the target. We've now got a 50-50 target, and we're at 48% female representation in the Labor Party because we kept extending ourselves. We set a target, meet it, beat it. We were hitting those targets early because it really does focus the mind. If you say, as an organisation, gender equality is important to us, and we're going to demonstrate our commitment to gender equality by applying, this 50-50 target to ourselves, it changes the whole way that an organisation operates. It also changes the culture when you get there, because you have a critical mass of women. It's not always up to a small minority to call out sexist behaviour. It changes the culture. It's no longer a hostile culture where women have to either be the constant sort of police of gender equality, or pretend that it doesn't matter to them to get along in a completely male-dominated environment. It is just natural for men and women to be treated equally, because the numbers create a less hostile environment. So for me, in my own pre-selection, I don't think being a woman was a disadvantage at all. Being very young, I think, was probably more of a barrier for some people to vote for me. So I had to really work hard to convince them that I was mature enough to do the job and experienced enough to do the job. I think the other thing I'd say about this is it's really important to be a woman that supports other women, and it doesn't mean that you will always agree with every woman. Like, it's politics. There's plenty of women that I don't agree with who are in the federal parliament, and I'm not going to pretend I agree with them just because they're women. But in my own organisation, to make space for the next generation and the next generation, and not be of the mindset that, oh, well, you know, I was tough enough to do it and everybody else should be tough enough to do it, but actually to think, how can we make it a bit easier? How can we make the environment less hostile and the journey a bit easier for the people who come after us? That's really important.
Well, as a young woman in politics, you would have a unique stance on this next question. We were wondering what some of the major lessons you have learned from your career in politics are.
I think probably the most important lesson I've learned recently is that as you become more senior in an organisation, you see less of the really bad behaviour. And I guess I thought things had got better. And I look at the experience of Brittany Higgins and then a whole lot of staffers, in particular female journalists, that have been speaking up recently about their experiences. And I realised that things may have improved a bit, but they haven't improved as much as I had hoped. What had changed was my exposure to the really bad behaviour. And so I guess the most important lesson for me is you have to keep working at it. You have to keep raising the standard. You have to keep making complaints processes and support processes simpler, clearer, easier to access. You have to keep working at it.
Just on that issue, how would you describe the importance of politics in achieving justice and promoting the public interest to a young person who doesn't fully understand why they should be engaged with politics?
Well, just I suppose starting with how this fits with the Me Too and Enough is Enough kind of movement. I think our federal parliament should be held to a higher standard than other workplaces. We should be an example of the best that's possible, not the worst you can get away with. And so I think making sure that we have the right processes, that bad behaviour is called out, that people get justice. I think it's more important in politics because it shows that no one is above the law, and that the consequences of bad behaviour are serious. We take this stuff seriously. And I don't think we've been doing that recently. I think there's a lot of examples where people have got away with pretty shocking behaviour that in fact would probably get them, you know, sacked or suspended in another workplace. So I think we need to do much better. And what I worry about is that will send a message to people who are thinking about getting involved in politics that it's that they shouldn't, that it's, you know, hostile, horrible, pointless, difficult. And actually the exact opposite is, well, what I want is the exact opposite. I want more good people who are idealistic to join. The best thing is really, if you are idealistic, if you care about your country, if you want something better for your generation, is get involved. And I wouldn't even say get involved in the Labor Party necessarily. Like, I would actually rather, if people want to, I mean, I want you to join the Labor Party, but if your political views are not aligned with that, I would still rather you get involved in any way in politics, because it does matter. You know, if you leave these decisions to other people, you can't complain about the results you get. You cannot give away your power, however, you know, unreal it may feel when you're a teenager. You do have the ability to change things in your environment, in your community, at your school, in your world, if you're prepared to work at that change. Not necessarily on your own. Like, it's actually pretty hard if you're just one person on your but by finding the people that are your peers, that you agree with, that you share common cause with, when you find the people that share your views and your values and you work with them to change something, you can be powerful, successful, have impact. And why does it matter? Well, it matters. It matters in so many different ways. You know, there are so many campaigns where young people have really changed things. I mean, I think the campaign for action on climate change is really driven a lot by young people themselves as activists and influencing their parents and their grandparents to demand more. But I think about examples like young carers who have fought for respite and other supports for young carers. I think about people who have fought for young people with profound disabilities who are housed in nursing homes to get accommodation of their own. I think about, you know, what's happening in gender equality at the moment, and it is very much driven by young women saying to their mothers and grandmothers, how have you not fixed this yet? You know, it may be a ridiculous example, but the reason we've got Triple J is because Young Labor convinced the senior Labor Party to start Double J, the radio station, a youth-focused ABC radio station. Like, young people can change the world. And I don't know why you would give up even the opportunity of doing that, of making things a bit better for the generation that you're part of.
As students, what can we do in high school to prepare ourselves for a future career, particularly in politics or public policy?
Take the opportunity to learn as much as you can, as broadly as you can, but there's no formula. Like, I think a lot of people think, well, if I want to, you know, get involved in politics, I should, I should study these things, and then I should do a law degree or a politics degree, and then I should, you know, work as a staffer. The thing that I enjoyed most in high school was art and art history. Like, I did 3 in an ancient art history and 3 in an ancient history. What you need is to develop your abilities so that you can think for yourself, so that you can question, so that you can research, so that you can take information and explain it to other people in a way they can follow it, and pursue the things that you care about. You know, there's no formula. There's no right way to go about it. You should do the thing that you love and do it wholeheartedly. And if that translates into changing the world around you, that's great. That's brilliant. That's great.
That's definitely something that a lot of people appreciate hearing, because I know with certain professions there's always certain subjects that you need to do, and there's always those misconceptions. But well, that brings us to the end of this interview. So thank you so much for your time. We certainly know that the students participating in this conference will take something away from your admirable career and words today. We're wishing you both all the best for the future. Take care of yourself, especially during this lockdown, and we really hope to see you another time.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you. Thanks so much for the interview. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.